sanitization of the facility. Let me welcome the Auditor General's team and the Ministry of Finance's team, the CDF team, and the team from the Office of the Prime Minister. Madam Auditor General, could you introduce yourself and your team?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members and staff from the Office of the Prime Minister. My name is Pamela Monroe-Ellis, and with me to my left is Marlon Macadam, Deputy Auditor General. Beside him is Aislinn Cooper, Audit Principal, and we're also joined by Clemar Johnson. Oh, behind me.
Ms. Blake.
Morning. Hope Blake, Deputy Financial Secretary, and beside me, Sasha Lawrence Rose.
Madam Pierce, you want to introduce the team from OPM and the CDF office?
What is happening with this? Yes, Chairman, thank you very much, and good morning to the committee members and my colleagues. I am Audrey Sewell, and with me are Mr. Wayne Robertson, Chief Technical Director, Office of the Prime Minister, Mr. Tafari Bori, newly appointed PFO, and to my left is Ms. Kadisha Campbell. She's the Director of CDF, and accompanying her is Mrs. Scott Blair, and she's the Project Development Analyst, CDF.
Thank you, Pierce, and welcome. Members, the minutes of the meeting of June 8th were circulated, and the hard copies are in front of you. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there are no corrections, could I have a motion for confirmation? So moved by Member Clark, seconded by Member Charles. Thank you. Are there any matters arising from the minutes which anybody would like to raise? No? Okay. Thank you. Members, we have before us quite a few documents. We have the Auditor General's brief on the compliance audit report. We also have the full compliance audit report, plus there were a number of other documents that were sent to us, both electronically and which we have here in hard copy. Madam Auditor General, can I invite you to start, and then we go to the CDF office.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. An audit of the financial transactions and related records pertaining to the period 2015-16 to 2019-20 of the CDF was conducted between 2019 and 2020. The audit aimed to assess whether management implemented the necessary controls to effectively identify, monitor, and manage fraud risk, and to determine whether the activities of the CDF PMU were conducted in keeping with the established GOJ guidelines. The key findings are outlined in the prompt, and I'll just summarize. 1, the absence of an effective risk management system or fraud prevention plan. 2, the inadequate controls over CDF disbursements. 3, inadequate monitoring of the CDF projects. And 4, inadequate controls over the educational development projects. The current status, Mr. Chairman, based on our verification, indicated that the OPM and the CDF PMU are taking steps to address the weaknesses identified. However, some areas remain outstanding, as shown in the prompt provided. And these are the absence of an effective risk management system or fraud prevention plan. Steps taken so far, however, includes the inclusion of that particular activity in the strategic plan. The CDF PMU now has a risk register. We're still concerned of the lack of objective criteria being established for the educational development projects, and there's still room for improvement over the monitoring of the CDF projects. And I'll stop there for now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Auditor General. PS, I don't know if you're going to start, or Ms. Campbell, just in terms of the RPS. Go ahead.
I don't know if somebody could fix it.
Fix this thing so it stays up.
Keeps. Thank you. Just for overview, we accept the report of the Auditor General that, yes, there were systemic weaknesses at the CDF. For me, it was a new area, and it really took a while to get into it, to understand how it operates in terms of the various relationships among the members of Parliament, Parliament itself, the Parliamentary Committee, the approvals, and the OPM's role in all of this. And it was quite timely. We got a report, and we really settled down. We had some issues. We had a change of leadership, and Ms. Campbell really got into it, and we started to implement. One of the first things that we did was to look at the previous audit. I think that was done in 2015, thereabout, the report, and we set about implementing the recommendations. We have achieved a significant amount, and with verification and re-verification by the Auditor General's department, we did have some setback because with the intervention of COVID and all of that, we had to recruit staff because the project was understaffed. Not all the staff vacancies were filled. We filled that out, and we are confident that we will continue with the implementation of the recommendations of the Auditor General. In terms of the two areas that the Auditor General raised, the objective criteria regarding the education grant, I must say that one of the things I recall when I met with Ms. Campbell at first to brief me, update me on CDF, its operations, and I recognize the need for us to have a review of the policies and the procedures, because there were some, yes, we saw some gray areas. And I was briefed and informed that it was the responsibility of the Ministry of Finance to do the review. And with that said, we have engaged the Ministry of Finance. We have started the process to review the policy manual for the CDF. We have sent to Finance some recommendations. They have responded, and the process is ongoing. And so that part is work in progress. And we hope to achieve that very soon with consultations with the parliamentarians and all the key stakeholders. And the other one you said, AG, if you could just remind me, I just...
Well, I spoke to the educational development projects and just the general
Right.
monitoring of the projects.
And
I think we're
monitoring
gonna
of the projects.
Right.
Okay, so that too, I think we have made significant strides in, because one of the things that we have done prior to the audit, we never had a memorandum of understanding with the various agencies, OPM and the implementing agencies. We have fine-tuned that. We have got everything in place. We have also, as I said before, engaged additional project officers, albeit insufficient, and in our discussion, we have taken the decision that we will be approaching the Ministry of Finance to review the structure, because currently we have like one project officer being assigned to approximately 11 constituencies, and that is not sustainable if we are to undertake the kind of monitoring and support that the projects need out there, even though some of them are being implemented through implementing agencies. That too is work in progress, and by probably the next 2 weeks or so, we will have something out to the Ministry of Finance. Suffice it to say, though, that one weakness that was identified in terms of consultation that we took on, and I am satisfied with what we have achieved to date. I think all the constituencies know we would have completed consultations in line with the policy document that these are to be done prior to implementations of projects. So we have taken the report seriously and we have been implementing the recommendations.
Thank you, Pierce. Just a question. So what's the total number of project officers? Is it 5 that you have right now, Ms. Campbell?
I have 8 project officers in the unit.
Oh, 8 for the, okay, I was just trying to do the math with the 63 and the 11.
I said approximately.
Okay, all right. And in an ideal world, what would be the, what's the maximum number of constituencies you think a project officer can adequately service?
I would say 6.
6? Okay. And
based on the nature of projects.
Okay, and they're doing about, on average, 8 roughly per project officer right now?
9.
9, roughly 9, okay. All right. Member Sibley's, you had a specific question on, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Overall, Chair, I had gone through the report and I'm also in agreement with the fact that it seems to me, even while the audit was going on, there have been some significant changes as they went along, like the risk register being implemented before the audit had concluded. So I just want to commend the PS with regards to that. I do hope that the Ministry of Finance will conclude on their part with regards to the risk management system. So, Chair, I've looked through these findings. I am not seeing anything significant per se. And based on the responses of the Permanent Secretary, I am satisfied with those that she has communicated. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Member Sibley's. Could I just ask some questions related to, I know there are some vacancies that you would like to fill. Have you made a submission to Finance? Because
no, there's no vacancy.
No, sorry, let me rephrase. Sorry, not vacancies. There are some positions that you would, for example, I see a risk officer, senior project officer for budgeting and accounting.
Yes.
So if you could indicate whether you have made a submission to Finance?
No, remember
okay.
I said earlier that we are preparing a submission, but for the risk management, risk officer, I'm not sure that we would want one specifically for CDF. It's something that we're looking at holistically across the ministry. And just to put something in context, which we would have shared with the AG, 3 years ago, approximately, I took the initiative because I'd been watching and seeing what is happening in terms of some of the feedback to other ministries. So we at OPM, we started to do some work in terms of developing our own internal framework and to engage a consultant to come and help us. And I shared it with the Ministry of Finance through the then project director to say this is what OPM wants to do and would like your input because we know we're going to need specialized staff and all of that. And the response we got from Finance was that the ministry itself was developing the entire risk management framework and structure to be rolled out into all the ministries, and in the same way that was done for the procurement, where the Ministry of Finance developed new procurement structure. That's what we were told. I must advise, though, that we have seen where finance has reached. They've shared with us the job descriptions for the new positions, and we have commented, we have looked at it, and we are awaiting now Minister of Finance to advise us of the positions. So for us, at this point in time, we will await the Minister of Finance's directive in terms of the implementation of the new structure for the risk management portfolio.
Thank you.
And then the budget officer, again, we have some weaknesses in our finance and accounts branches, and that's for another discussion in the ministries. And based on the feedback we got from the Auditor General's report, we are of the view that we should ask the Ministry of Finance for a dedicated body to manage and monitor the accounting processes for CDF, because it is significant. So we are working on that.
Thank you, Pierce. Members, are there any questions on the prompt or on the compliance audit report itself?
You're all over the audit, the report, Chairman.
If I'm what?
Anywhere?
I mean, if I was starting with the prompt from the AG, but if you have a question elsewhere, you can go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. The matter I'm looking at, pardon me for being a bit parochial, but there were two instances, Chairman, in 2019, 2020, and 2016, 2017.
Sorry, I'm not hearing it.
Sorry. There were two instances cited in the reports that we have gotten in 2016, 2017.
Just tell us which document you're looking.
This is the disbursement to constituencies. Disbursements to constituency, Appendix 4. Appendix
4? Okay, all right, go ahead.
In 2016-17 and 2019-20, there was an excess of $500,000 sent to St. Mary's Central. In these two instances, Madam Pierce, my understanding in discussion initially with the then director and the current one was that this amount was reimbursement to the constituency as a consequence of SDC's withholding. I think that's a correct word. I was going to use another one that starts with P, but withholding funds for the constituency under the SCSP program previous years, and this was a return to the constituency of the amounts, parts of the amounts that were due. It would be good if the committee could know now or subsequently with information what are the total amounts owed by SDC to be reimbursed to the CDF under the SCSP program, and which constituencies have been affected by this amount and to what extent, and further, when will they be reimbursed the entire amount?
Okay, thank you, member. So the SDC has started to return the CDF PMU since my inception stage in 2019. They have given us 36 million of the 109 million. And there are MPs that are currently benefiting from that return of funds.
Could all MPs know whether there are balances that are outstanding?
I would have started that communication, Member Robinson, and I believe that I would have communicated that also to Member Guy.
Through the chair,
yes.
Generally, Chair, what I have picked up since becoming a member of Parliament is it is also important for each member of Parliament to reconcile with all the agencies. So I have actually sent letter to RADA, St. Andrew, so that I can see what balance they claim to have for the constituency. And it's also important when you move from MP to MP, because you would know as a member of parliament what's sitting in the agency for you. But a new member of parliament coming in would not be aware. So I remember my first CDF meeting in 2016, getting an appreciation that I should check. And so I checked with RADA, SDC, the municipal corporation, everywhere that money could have possibly been sent, and reconcile with them what they had for St. Andrew East Rural. Since then, I must commend the CDF, because I have actually seen under Ms. Campbell reconciliations now being done for each constituency on a quarterly basis with the CDF, and we are also encouraged. So they send us a report reconciling with us what is happening between us and CDF, and also what would have been sent to the agencies. And I try to keep doing that reconciliation on an ongoing basis. So even on a particular month end, or if they, I guess time is also a challenge for them, but if you organize with each agency, you can say, look, can you reconcile with me as at March? Can you reconcile with me as at July? I'm going to want to do another reconciliation in 2 months, so that they prepare and you prepare, and you're able for each account, for each supplier to reconcile what you would have sent off to the supplier or collected checks from say, SDC, and what you got from CDF. So MPs, we are also going to need to be a part of that process to reconcile CDF/agency/the member of parliament's office, so that you know where your funds are, how much they have. And I know in recent CDF meetings, if you would have heard it, the argument has been the CDF office has now been pushing to have, if we have not spent the money, it is going back, so that there is not this major build-up. I appreciated the build-up, though, I must tell you, Ms. Campbell, because in 2016 I benefited from almost 7 million left by the previous member of parliament. And I don't think it is something that is going to be so easy for us anymore, because CDF is not allowing it. So the pressure is there for us to spend. If not, it is reimbursed.
Chairman, may I?
Yes.
Okay. One of the responsibilities that we say would go into the JD of the senior budget officer that we're going to be requesting is ongoing reconciliation. It is really very challenging. You know, you send the money out and to keep abreast of what is happening out there, and they send it back and all of that. So the recommendation about reconciliation, and so the remedy, one remedy will be to have a dedicated budget officer to deal with that kind of thing.
Through the chair, my concern continues to be the agencies. The last meeting we had at PAC, we met with the St. Catherine Parish Council and the Kingston Municipal Corporation as well. And when you got a sense, particularly for St. Catherine, who was not in a place, and the Auditor General's office had to be helping them to try to be prepared to have their accounts audited, which is a concern, but it tells you how bad it is. So if your agencies are not able to properly reconcile an account, I am sure it's supposed to create a nightmare for the CDF who sends funds to them, because I don't know if you would be able to quickly know, did they document properly that they received the money? Did they actually disburse? Can they say? And so we really need to sit down and look at that three-way connection between the CDF, these agencies, particularly those that do not account well, and the members of parliament, just to be able to see if there are any gaps in that three-way connection. Because the MP may also be able to say, look, my reconciliation report shows that I didn't get any money from St. Catherine. So how is it that they recorded that they gave me $1 million? And that may be now what's per CDF to say, but on the report from the municipal corporation, you said you gave St. Andrew East Rural X or Y. I really think, AG, that is an area that we have to figure out, because we can't leave the CDF as being the only arm responsible to reconcile agencies that you have given funding to.
Can I ask a question, PS? Who determines the implementation fee that the agencies charge to CDF? And what is the base? Because we are paying these agencies an implementation fee, and from all accounts, the onus and the responsibility for everything rests still with the CDF office. But is there a basis for 5% versus 2% versus 1%
it's
versus 0%
it's
as an
the
example?
implementing agencies. And what Ms. Campbell just said is that
Chairman,
we really don't
follow.
support, it's administrative fees. We don't support their budget to implement the projects. So it's their way. Just like, say, NAA is an executive agency, it has to earn money. And it costs money for them to implement the projects. And so they have to recoup some of the costs. So,
no, man, I know, but
yeah.
so, for example, so they could determine it could be 10% or 15%, or so
yes.
That's what I'm saying.
They're the ones who determine it. And probably with the guidance of Ministry of Finance, it's one of the areas we may want to look at.
Okay.
Chairman, there's a follow-up. PS.
And I'm told it was negotiated with the agencies and mutually agreed. But if it is time for us to review it, I don't know. We can look at it.
Might I also ask in terms of the oversight? There are many instances, PS, where the implementing agency charges a contingency on the project. Has the CDF gone in to ascertain whether that contingency was actually utilized or not? And if not, has it been returned to the CDF as part of the amounts? Because invariably, you have all the project documents that come in, they have a contingency on it. And it's not in all cases the contingency is utilized. But if there's no oversight to see whether it's returned, then the implementing agency
Ms. Campbell will
uses that.
respond. Ms. Campbell.
Yes, member, we have been doing that, and I can speak specifically to my tenure. We have now started out the closing out of reports. Therefore, they will tell you the project is 100% completed, what balance is left on the project, and also on our monthly reports, we can track those to say if the contingency fees were used or they are to be returned to the CDF PMU. A letter would be issued asking for the return of funds.
No, but further to Madam Director, if a particular or a series of project in a constituency has funds returned out of contingency funds not utilized, then those funds, the accumulation of those funds or the amount of funds that are returned should be used for the benefit of the constituency. So the members of parliament ought to be advised that there are return funds from contingency, and hence you may use it to support an increase in budget or otherwise.
We have been doing that, Member Guy. I think you can recall we advised you about the St. Mary for the road rehabilitation, Farm Road. And we told you that
there was a project that was not done.
Yes, but I'm telling you that we're advising members of parliament of balances, of return funds, of contingency fees, and others can speak to the fact that I would have issued letter advising them that there are monies at the office to be utilized for the constituency.
I'm just not seeing any contingency funds returned, so that's why I'm asking. For
We
me, for Central.
No, not for St. Mary Central.
Through the chair,
yes.
Just to make sure that the public understands, contingency funds would actually come about with infrastructure work, which many of us don't have enough money in the CDF to be able to do that in a very substantial way. I would I know that we are being notified. A member guy is not on the CDF. I've seen indications where both money is not spent. MPs have been written to. We have had the concerns because we have seen projects coming for persons who got those funding 4 or 5 years ago, and the money is sitting at particularly St. Mary, all right, and I've seen for Portland, and I've actually spoken to some of the members of parliament so concerned. So the CDF has gone through the process now of, I've noticed from my position as CDF chairman, observing them or notifying the MPs. And I must tell you, Director Campbell, many of the MPs are quarreling and grumbling about how fast they are required to execute these projects now, not to be in a position to lose. So we want to make sure we maintain that balance, because some of the times we do need some time. So we, instead of having 6 months after the year to complete, we need to look and see if each person is in a position, based on their constituency, based on the projects that they have submitted, and not be in a place where we actually lose money. I think it is a terrifying thing for us as MPs, thinking about the prospect of losing any of the meager CDF funds that we got before. But we'd want to thank you for that, because we are seeing the reminders and appreciate it.
Member Charles, then Member Sibley's. You're okay, Member Sibley's?
Chair, my point was, I think it might have been addressed. It's with regards to the agencies and their ability or inability to reconcile the CDF funds that are sent to them, and to ensure that their books are in line with the books of the CDF and also with each member of parliament. And I have seen the recommendation, but I don't see where from the CDF position they can do the reconciling of for the agencies. I really don't see it. And I think we need to find a way to bring the agencies to book and to ensure that they reconcile their books. And maybe the internal auditors of these various agencies can be used to audit the CDF funds to see if proper reconciliation is being done. Because hence we are going to be asking the CDF to get more staff, when I am of the view that there is adequate amount of staff in the agencies that can do the reconciliation. And those are my points as it relates to the reconciliation of the CDF fund. I noted that the reconciliation from the CDF point of view have been completed and is in line, but it is really from the agency's perspective that there's a difference, and that difference needs to be reconciled.
All right, thank you, Member Sibley's. Member Hero Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, listening to what is happening here today, and have heard from municipal corporation before, it is of grave importance that we look at it in a holistic approach, not just here, but in other committee meetings, or maybe by and large the ministry itself. Because what I've recognized, Mr. Chairman, is a domino effect. The fact of the matter is that the municipal corporation did mention that some of them are understaffed in areas that you really need to reconcile their books. And so it sends that ripple effect, as I would say, up or across to other agencies such as CDF. And so, as Member Sibley is saying, Mr. Chairman, it needs to be addressed from that point so that it makes a smooth flow when it comes around to agencies such as CDF. But, Mr. Chairman, I am also looking at the document presented before us, because the Auditor General would have done her findings report and also the response from the CDF. And I notice here the document is...
Just tell me which one you're on, which page.
Sorry.
You're on the briefing report?
Yes, the PAC brief.
What page?
I am looking at, I don't see a number on the page, but I'm looking at the key findings.
Key findings, okay, go ahead.
And it speaks to key to issue status. And on it, Mr. Chairman, we have 15 of them, and would have the management response, the status verification, and they give you some symbols to make it easier for you to identify. The one that speaks to satisfactory or satisfied is 8. The one that speaks to keep in view is 5, and 2 outstanding, Mr. Chairman. And if you notice, Mr. Chairman, the 2 that are outstanding is the area that I think that CDF does not have all the control over, and that is a senior project officer budgeting account, and has not yet been recruited. And so I know then it would be coming from up top to alleviate that situation. And then the proposed amendment are still in a draft situation, Mr. Chairman. So I am very happy. I'm very happy, Mr. Chairman, that from the findings of the Auditor General, that CDF has responded in a timely and very speedily. And so, Mr. Chairman, if the other agency could just use this as a marker to help them to be more proactive and make things happen, Mr. Chairman, I think we would have a smooth flow of governance.
I want to say I'm particularly happy that the CDF is doing well based on the public commentary around the CDF and the perception about how the CDF is used and what it is used by us as members of parliament for. So I'm particularly happy that based on the Auditor General's findings and your responses, you are addressing the systemic weaknesses, and that by and large, and I haven't heard of any major issues in terms of from an accountability perspective, that is also important, because it is critical to the public trust between us as the MPs and what the public views us as. And this particular fund has been labeled all sorts of negative things in the public domain. So I'm glad we are up to date with that.
Chairman, I would like to give some support to that statement. Even last night I had a major problem, and I think we also will have to do some more work in having the public become aware of the increased strictures of our governance process now. So I got a note from somebody saying, you want to tell me if I have people who don't have no IDs and cannot present anything, they can't get some food? For the first time, CDF, in doing an allocation of funds from Ministry of Finance, required that we have forms to be filled out with the name of every recipient, the amount of the benefit they got, they were to sign, they had to have their TRN. It is very important for Jamaicans to understand, because becoming an MP, for some reason, persons had the perception that the CDF money, we got it in cash, we drop it in our pocket, and as we walk through the constituency, we give it out. I don't know where they got that perception from, but I think it is important for them to understand. And coming out of even last meeting, some of the municipal corporations were very upset that I said they need to do like CDF, they need to have consultation, and I stand by it. The public needs to have an appreciation for how we govern now. appreciate that the entire CDF can be used for welfare. The CDF has to be used in a way where there are structured limits, upper limits and lower limits for spending on welfare, housing, education. They need to know and understand it, and they need to know and understand that as members of parliament, it is not our ability to just get up and give anything and any amount that we would like. It is good to have these consultations and have persons know the limits even for individuals. And one of the areas I saw CDF moving to, which I appreciate, it's something I was doing before anyways, but I would still find myself as an MP from time to time giving a benefit to an individual who I couldn't find on the voters list, and then I would realize they're really not from my constituency. They claim to live there, they come to the office, but they're not from there. I see the CDF moving to forcing us as members of parliament. The benefit for your constituency should go to the constituents. So we as members within the constituency, so we as members of parliament need to ensure that the public is aware that it is not free for all, it is not the days of old. Today and yesterday was the good old yesterday. We have a lot of rules and strictures being implemented by the CDF office in how the fund is administered from their end, and equally how it is administered through the Member of Parliament's office. And we want to thank you for it because it protects us, and we want to make sure that the public is aware that those are the strictures under which we operate.
I must say, not for the record, I'm beginning to adopt the Warmington principle in this regard with respect to... No. But, Member Guy.
I've listened to the suggestions made as it relates to the respective implementing agencies as to what they're supposed to do, as well as CDF, and the notion that CDF, and it might be my interpretation that CDF ought not to have that oversight if the implementing agencies do their audit. But I am of the view that in spite of the fact that these implementing agencies have their audits, CDF ought to have to ensure that they are in sync. Just like how the AG does the audit for CDF and the disbursements, if there are any variances, then that can be brought to light. Now, the point I want to make, Chairman, and I don't know if you indicated that we are at liberty to interrogate the report.
Point of order before you go, Member Guy, that's not what was being said.
So it's my perception.
Yes, it's your misunderstanding.
Okay.
So the intent is not that CDF relax and take no responsibility for reconciling with the agencies. However, as an auditor, what happens, just like you have an independent supplier, they also have their accounts and records. So what it requires is, based on your accounts and records, you then say to them, provide for me, if it's quarterly or whatever, or every 6 months, your accounts and records. Give me the balance you have for me, and I give you the balance I have for you. If the two balances are not the same figure, then both now say, okay, let us see where we have these variances, what caused the variances. And CDF now will say, look, I don't see you in your report making reference to this disbursement of $50 million that you got in X time or Y time, and I don't see you making reference to $20 million that you sent back to us because it was not spent for over 5 years. So that's the sort of thing that happens. And then you are ultimately able to reconcile. Now, if you have serious weakness in the agencies, it will take you forever, because one arm can't clap in that regard. And if that agency doesn't keep very good accounts, you're going to find that you put a lot of pressure now on the CDF, if they have good accounts, to be the ones to sit down and walk through and say, let me show you proof. Here is the proof that you got the money. Here is the proof that you this. Here is the proof. Here is the proof. So all the responsibility now goes back to the CDF office to try to reconcile for the agency what's happening within their agency. So what should really happen, and it's coming out of the last meeting with municipal corporations, the internal audit function at each of these agencies need to get up to snuff. The Auditor General will benefit from it because it's a struggle for her to audit agencies that are way off the mark in terms of their accounts. And it is equally a struggle now trying to reconcile with another arm of government. So we hold the CDF office responsible, yes.
Not the prompt. Okay, fine.
Of the Prime Minister.
So I'm advised that in this particular matter, it would be relating to prep school and private high school. Yes.
I see a challenge here. Well, as was indicated, there's no objective criteria as it relates to that assistance. But what I am looking at further is the suggestion that one family receive financial assistance totaling 1.17, and would like to ask a question. One, for, it says a period under review. Am I to assume that it is for the years 2016 to 2020 of this amount, 1.17, and the other serious concern I have relates to 3.7. Question I'd like to ask, one, is the second case involved payment $670,850 in 2016-17 and 17-18. Does that mean it's a total of $1.3 million over the 2 years, or it is $670,850 each for the 2 years, or is it for each year? And which is even startling when the final two lines are seen, Chairman, where a member of Parliament on behalf of the MP's relative received that to offset the cost of a bachelor's degree. The maximum amount that is allowed for constituencies, I think, is about $6.5 million for education now, or at the time. So we're looking at about 12% of that particular allocation that went to one individual. Is in the whole scheme of things, whereas there's no criteria, but wouldn't that particular allocation, Madam Director, send off a red flag? Wouldn't there be a red flag there if that comes up to the CDF, as it would? That's very concerning.
Can you structure the question for clarity? I'm still not on the last part of your question.
Okay. I was asking two questions. Whether the second case involved payments $670,850 in 2016-17 and 2017-18. Are those, Madam AG, two separate amounts of $670,000 plus? And the part that I'm asking the Director to answer is that, having seen that come and having regard to the fact that amounts to about 12% of any maximum allocation, and I'm not certain what the allocation on education for that particular member of Parliament, I'm just presupposing that's the maximum that is utilized. Wouldn't that send off flags, red flags, for the CDF?
So to answer the question posed to me, the total amount is 670.
And the question as it relates to me, Member Guy, remember that when MPs make a request from their approved allocation, those requests goes directly to the implementing agency, not to the CDF office. Hence, that is why we are reviewing the operational procedures to put in limits wherein one single beneficiary can get up to X amount or Y amount. The process is ongoing with the Ministry of Finance. Specifically the education category.
For education, I have found persons asking us for money for overseas education. I tell them no, I say if you can afford to go overseas to study, then unfortunately Jamaica can't afford to help you with it. But we do have cases of persons
one of the things, sir, we are trying to do is to align it, the policy. It's a recommendation from us in terms of the review to align it to government's policy in terms of funding, like for tertiary education. So, for example, for some loans, some grants, even from the Ministry of Education, they don't fund for overseas education, particularly if the programs can be accessed here. So we're looking at current policies at the Ministry of Education, the Student Loan Bureau, to make recommendation in terms of how we go forward.
Can I just hold, Member Charles had her hand up, but 1 second, member. Just for clarity in relation to private educational institutions. So let's take, we have a number of tertiary institutions. Some are funded by the government, but others, I'd say the majority, would be privately funded. Does that mean that we are not supposed to support requests for persons who want to go to privately funded tertiary institutions?
No, I don't agree, because education you can access anywhere, as long as there are standards and they conform with the government standards for tertiary education. For example, are they accredited? So there are some criteria we would have to look at, whether the programs are accredited wherever they are, whether by public or private institutions. That would be one of the main criteria that we would look at. Are they accredited, you know?
And then another question, more and more persons are doing online degrees and programs where they're physically here, but the university exists or is registered abroad somewhere. Again, you know,
have to look if
that's something that you would have to set some guidelines
accredited. The modality to access it would not, for me personally, would not be, you know, important. The important thing is the standing of the programs, whether they are accredited. Yeah.
Okay. Member Charles?
Just one more question on this. It sort of concerned me that, no, same area. If, say, I have a constituency secretary, she lives in the constituency, she votes in the constituency, am I not at liberty if she wants to attend an educational institution, puts in a needs assessment for education as help, to say to her, no, you work at the Member of Parliament's office, you have a salary as a constituency secretary, so you can't get any educational assistance. How AG could answer that?
Member, that's not for me to answer. I just want to put into perspective the report, right, based on the comments made, that the aim here, what is being highlighted here, is not to say whether it is right or wrong, but to say that there's absolutely no criteria. And so you see inconsistencies among the beneficiaries. The sums, you spoke to it earlier in your statement in responding to Member Guy, that there should be limits, but there's no established limit. So as we indicated, 2.4 million disbursed over between 15, 16, 18, 19, and one person got the lion's share of that. So that's really what it's about. It's not to say whether support can be given to someone attending a private institution versus a public institution, but it is a welfare program. That's my understanding. That is what it morphed from the SESP program. With the SESP program, there were much stricter guidelines that would provide some guide, for want of a better word, to the implementing agency. That does not exist here. But we should not lose sight of the fact that it is a welfare program. So for example, with the SESP, to benefit from SESP disbursements, you had to prove that you were living below the poverty line. That was one of the criteria established in the SESP guidelines. That doesn't exist here. And nor are we saying that persons, because you made a point, in fact, I think in one of the beneficiaries resides outside of the constituency, but there is no guideline there to say that someone outside of the constituency, well, I think probably there is, but in that particular instance, it was not complied with. But in terms of the limits, there is no guideline there. If it is that someone within the constituency is going to benefit, if somebody within the constituency office is going to benefit, then there should be some declaration. And it should be that the individual should be totally recused from the process, but it's not transparent.
Actually, I asked because I do have a constituency secretary from the constituency who has requested education assistance. Without any prompt, and I'm actually happy that we would be putting in place these limits. I've observed it over time. Without any prompt, strange enough, I'm a member of parliament who thinks about those things. So if I have a student at med school, I say, look, unfortunately, you can't benefit for more than 500,000 out of the fund because it is unfair to other people in the constituency who need to be able to access a benefit. For my constituency secretary, it was the same. You can't get much for education assistance. I will refer you to Ministry of Labour, Ministry of Education. I referred all over the place because at the end of the day, you would not be able to access more than another individual in the constituency. So I specifically asked because I have the same situation of a member of my constituency office, particularly constituency secretary, who got access to education assistance. Nowhere in the quantity here, probably $100 and something thousand it was, but I wanted for my own benefit to make sure that I charted the correct course.
I don't think your mic, we're not here. The one beside you.
Okay, I think that's better now. Are you hearing me? Right. So we cited these specific examples because what we saw is that related parties, and I use related parties generally, were benefiting disproportionately when you compare the benefits awarded to the ordinary beneficiaries.
Even though it's not pervasive, it's a good point for us as members of parliament to pay attention to and to learn from going forward. Because as Ms. Campbell indicated, when we make a request from our allocated fund sent to an agency, by the time it comes to light for the CDF, we have already spent it. So we as members of parliament have a duty and responsibility to appreciate that the monies that are allocated and the resources aren't our money, for us to decide how we want to spend it and for us to give who our friends, our family members are, or our associates and the people that we like. It is something for the public to understand, our constituents to understand, and for us as members of parliament to understand. So that by the time our expenditures get back to CDF for assessment, none of us are found in a place that one has to question, why would we spend $500,000 on one person's funeral or give $2 million to one individual for education? So I want to make sure I make that point for my colleague MPs who are sitting here as well as those who are not sitting in the presence, because it is important.
All right, Member Charles, go ahead.
Not hearing you clearly.
Speak up a little. I don't know if your mic is.
How often are the implementing agencies required to submit a report? My goodness, my voice not loud enough.
It depends on the volume of projects that they handle. So some will send on a monthly basis and some on a quarterly basis.
I'm just wondering, how do you think that you would have caught this situation in particular that we're talking about? Would you have seen this through a report from an implementing agency?
No, I would not have seen that. I would see the category of spend, how much would have spent, what's the status of the project, how many persons would have benefited, what would have caused a red flag, though. It depends on the amount of money and the amount of beneficiary. So let me give you an example. You're doing an education project for $5 million. However, you only have 5 beneficiaries and the project is 100% completed. It gives me an idea that each beneficiary would have gotten $1 million. That now would be a red flag to me, and I would investigate it, what would have caused this, but it would happen already. That is why there is a moral responsibility. When the projects are written, they are followed to the guidelines, because we do indicate the approximation of beneficiaries and the approximation of benefits.
Member Miller.
Thank you, Sir Chair. I would like a clarity, because I heard something earlier that if a person is studying overseas and seek assistance from the Office of the Member of Parliament, especially if the discipline is offered here in Jamaica. You know, and I heard the chairman ask a question in terms of the person is here in Jamaica but studying overseas. You know, are we saying that we give assistance where that is concerned?
I don't think I had said no. What I said was that we're looking to align the recommendations that we're looking at in the review to align what is done through the CDF in terms of the educational program. And all of this is just proposal. No decision has been taken to what the government's policy or what happens, for example, at the Ministry of Education, where there are some grants that they would not give if you're studying overseas, and particularly if the programs can be accessed here. We're looking also at what the policy of the Student Loan Bureau and funding overseas studies. So we're just looking at this point in time to come up with some recommendations.
Members, are there, you have a follow-up? Go ahead. Yeah.
No, thanks for the clarity, PS, because I think the chairman had asked a question, so the response was given and it was clear. I know there are various disciplines like veterinarian that is not offered here, that the government will give scholarships for persons to study overseas, but especially...
in the Caribbean, though.
Absolutely. Yeah. So thanks for the clarity.
What about children who are in private institutions who are
needs?
Yes, special needs.
Yeah, because you have, I mean, there's a growing trend where children are assessed. They can't necessarily operate in a typical, 35, 40 classroom setting, and they have to, and certainly for the special needs institutions, they are certainly more costly than the normal. Would there be any prohibition, so to speak, in assisting students of that nature?
And I want to ask that question as well, Director, even in terms of food packages, because the situation that I had with somebody complaining, there were some special needs students who were turned out of the institution because they had reached the age of 18 years old, but had nowhere to live, nowhere to go, no ID, no documentation of their existence, but they would like to benefit. How do we handle situations like that?
Member Holness, I did not hear your question. However, I'll speak to the special needs. We, as the PS indicated, that we're currently in dialogue with the Ministry of Finance for some clause and the operational procedures to be reviewed and amended. And one of the suggestions offered by the Ministry of Finance is that potential students attending private institutions shall not be eligible for educational development assistance except for those identified as having special needs. Example, students with physical or developmental deficiencies, the gifted and talented that cannot be addressed in the traditional learning environment. Those are still being considered. It is not approved as yet. However, this suggestion was sent to us by the Ministry of Finance.
Okay, good. Thank you.
My question, Director, wasn't far from there. When we did the last set of food package distribution with the funds from Ministry of Finance, we had the same situation, people with special needs who had aged out of institutions of the government but had nowhere to live, had no food to eat, and had no ID or any form of ability to show who they are and where they came from, but wanted to benefit from the CDF. So I am wondering if we could incorporate not just education, when we're looking at special needs individuals, especially as we move towards limiting the ability to be providing funding to individuals outside of your constituency, that we look at some exceptions for special needs individual persons who are of unsound mind generally in whatever policies we put in place. So we have a small, ability to divert for individuals who are in that sort of situation.
Noted, member.
Members, are there questions, other questions that members have of the CDF unit?
Nobody looked to have any question. I looked around, but I wanted to
Okay,
make a
go
comment.
ahead.
Not a question, just a comment. I actually found it quite pleasing to observe how the CDF office operated and how it has grown and improved in terms of its governance structure and general operation. And I must commend the CDF office for the volume of work you must have put in to be at a place where this is the quality of your audit compared to audits I've seen before. I must commend you for the work that you have done. It could not have come easily. What I would love for you to do is to share some of the structures, limits, requirements with some of, I won't say just implemented agencies, with the parish councils. I'll just get straight to it. So that the parish councils can bring themselves up to books as well by comparing how they operate, how they do their benefits with how the CDF operate, and get us on a level playing field as government right across the board. We can definitely take lessons from the operations of the CDF in our municipal corporations that we would be able to benefit as a government from right across the board.
Member Miller.
Thanks, Sir Chair. I'd like to echo the sentiments of my colleague a short while ago. But personally, I'd like to thank Madam PS and Ms. Campbell from CDF as a new parliamentarian for, advising, educating, and informing me as a structure of the CDF, holding my hand in terms of consultation and how to write projects and, how to implement them. And I want to place that on the record and how the agency has been run currently.
Thank you, Member Miller. Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I want to echo the same sentiments of my colleagues in terms of Ms. Campbell's support for myself as a new member of Parliament. She has been quite supportive in giving me advice and directions and calling me and, giving me some pointers as to how the CDF operates, because it's quite a learning curve. And we do know how things can unravel in a very untidy way. So I really appreciate it, and I want to put it on record. I had one question that I would want to follow up on, and it is pertaining to the benefits that constituents may get. I do have constituents who have given funding for education, and they have subsequently moved from the constituency, albeit they haven't registered to vote just yet because of their age. So I wanted to know, because I think it was the AG who mentioned that you do have MPs who allocate funding for persons who are not in their constituency. But I wanted to have clarity, because we do have situations where they move subsequent to getting the allocation. And we do have situations where persons move to the constituency and comes to the office. And I just want to put it on record that I'm an MP for all, not just those who vote for me. Because it is my intention to have those who do not vote for me to vote for me the next time around. So I will see as best as possible how to use the government resources and effectively administer it, so I can show them.
Let me do a follow-on before you answer that.
Try this one. Here, Marlon.
Okay. Who cut me out? Yes, I know it's not a campaign, but incidentally somebody cut me off. I don't know why. But I'm just going to end right there and say I just wanted clarity on that particular note, because it is of concern, because I do know I have given grants to persons who have moved, and I know actually they have moved to Kingston because they are taking up their so it's not just their sojourn for studying, but they have subsequently moved to Kingston for opportunities. So I would want to know and get some clarity on that. Thank you.
Before Ms. Campbell answers, Member Wilson, you weren't here earlier. There are some things that we are asked to distribute in constituencies that become a challenge, because yes, we cannot verify that every single individual is from the constituency. Other than the actual voters list with the individual's name that we would be able to use to reconcile and say, see here, this is proof that this individual comes from, resides in, and they could even not reside in, they're just on the voters list as being assigned to your constituency. So the idea is not to be 100% rigid that nobody, but we shouldn't be seeing incidents of your constituents getting education assistance and everybody in your constituency get between $10,000 to $50,000. And then all of a sudden, you see somebody get $1 million, only to realize that this person is from nowhere near your constituency. That's the idea. If somebody gets up afterwards and moves, that's not the concern. They were in your constituency. They're probably still on the voters list, or their parents are from your constituency accessing that benefit. But we shouldn't be in a position where it gives the sense that you are taking care of people outside. I have no qualms in telling people your MP from wherever you come from get the same 20 million allocation that I get. And East Rural St. Andrew is one of the biggest constituencies, so go back to your member of parliament for help. It doesn't matter when they come to me and say my MP is a PMP MP, so me come to you, that's their business. Go to your member of parliament, because your member of parliament has received an allocation for that constituency. The allocation for my constituency would be for the members of my constituency, whether they be JLP, PMP, or no P.
Thank you. Members, the question from Member Wilson. Does address the question from Member Wilson.
What was the question? He made a comment, I don't know. What was the question?
Ms. Campbell, you weren't clear about the question.
Can you repeat?
I don't know. I heard a comment, I didn't hear a question.
No. What I understand the member to be asking is if somebody has moved outside of his constituency, I don't think there's any issue with that. Right, yeah. Yeah. So, Member Wilson, there's no issue if somebody is in Westmoreland but moves to UWI or UTEC here. It was said earlier, that's not the issue.
You can't take back the benefit.
Member Guy?
Chairman, and this is my final comment for the morning, because I think you might just, yes, really. I just want to say to the committee, and not the committee, but the persons who are before us, Madam PS and Madam Director, it is very refreshing to attend to the CDF office and get the support that we get. I mean, I can sit as a member of parliament, and the officers, I have a certain gentleman in my constituency who called me at times just to tell me that the money is here or the money is there. And we have a good relationship, not only with him, but with the directors, the director, Mrs. Blair, and all the others. And, you know, it's refreshing for government agencies to see that, and it's something like we like to commend to others to do as well.
Thank you, member.
All right, members, any other questions? All right, let me thank the CDF and encourage you to continue on the path that you're on in terms of the service that you provide to us and to our constituents. Members, is there any other business?
Thank you.
We're not going to meet next week, but members, the next report that we have it before us is the Auditor General's annual report. But what I want to ask the Auditor General to do, instead of us going through the entire report, if there are specific ministries or areas that you believe need to be flagged for our attention, then we can do that. If not, because what I don't want to do is spend the entire time on what I might call a fishing expedition, just going through a report if they're not very specific things. So I would recommend that we not meet next week, Tuesday, but the Auditor General could provide some guidance to us in relation to our annual report, and then we would meet on the following Tuesday, which would be July 13th, which would also give us an opportunity to get from the AG's department any specific things related to the annual report, and then we could examine it then. All right? So that is the proposal, members. Oh, and I understand, Member Holness, you have a request for us to meet earlier on the 20th at 9:30 to facilitate another committee meeting. Right, so we're just asking members to bear in mind, I think we only have probably 3 more meetings before Parliament goes on recess. So next one would be the 13th. On the 20th, we would meet at 9:30. Your meeting is what time? Okay. Would be at what time? 11:30 or 12? Oh, so we don't have much time. All right. All right, so members, for that meeting, we're going to have to be on time because there's a COVID meeting at 11:30. That's the 20th. But for the next meeting on the 13th, we meet at 10 o'clock our normal time. Could I have a motion for the adjournment? Member Wilson, Member Clark, thank you very much. And thank you for the efficiency of this meeting.